Hello, hello out there. We are about to go live. Well, we are live. I think so. Welcome, welcome. If you have come to our session today, we're about to do our second of the end of the year sanctuary session on boundaries, desires, and generational healing. This is really intended to be a session to get nourished before the holidays, to reconnect and plug in with yourself. And we're going to be diving into that in just a couple of minutes. Let's just see if we are online. So if you are watching on any of our social channels, let me know with a quick note that you're out there, that you can hear me, and we'll dive in a moment. Looks like we are live on YouTube. Wonderful. Thanks, Bailey, for letting us know. If you are arriving here, I invite you to take a moment to get what you need to be here for the next hour. It's lunchtime here in California, so grab your lunch, cup of coffee, glass of wine if it's later in the day where you are, whatever you need to be comfortable, to be just in a good space, in your own space. While we are online, you could just imagine that we're not online. We're actually sitting in a room together in comfy couches, comfy chairs, taking a little time to reflect, a little time to breathe more deeply, a little time for ourselves as we prepare for, most of us, depending on when you're watching this, our holiday breaks here in the US. Awesome. Hi from Nashville, live on LinkedIn. Excellent. Looks like everything is working. Okay, I'm going to go ahead and dive in. I'll start with just a brief introduction. If you've been coming to these sessions or you watch my lives often, you know me, but for those who may not, I'm Leanne Mallory. I am a somatic, so an embodiment teacher. I'm an executive coach, a leadership trainer, and the creator of the Guts and Grace Women's Executive Coaching Program, also author of the book by the same name, Guts and Grace, A Woman's Guide to Full-Bodied Leadership. I see myself as a teacher, a healer, an artist, and a guide for the secretly or not so secretly spiritual professional woman who is committed to making big change in her industry, her organization, or her community, and who knows that she needs to and wants to do that without burning out. Mostly what I do is I help women remember the wisdom of their own bodies has a lot to offer to their leadership, really make ties and connections between anything you might be doing in the more physical or kind of personal healing, again, somatic realms, with who you are as a leader in the workplace. And I've been doing this work for, in some capacity, we might say around 17 years. If you walk the dog a little further backwards, probably a bit longer than that informally. But I started Guts and Grace in about 2009 when I brought together a fairly unique embodied leadership and embodied transformation curriculum that is really designed to help us step out of the ways we may have embodied early career survival strategies. I sometimes will say the patriarchy within, the ways we've taken on not self ways of being that don't actually help us to lead well, but may have kind of gotten us to the first couple rungs or even higher rungs on the ladder. So this work is a lot about unlearning. It's a lot about listening to our own bodies, a lot about reconnecting and trusting ourselves. And for today's session, we're going to do some of that in practice and some of that in reflection and conversation in preparing to go into the holidays, or if you're watching this later, any moments in your life when you might be navigating with family, friends, with people, lots of people around you. To go into it in a way that does honor our own needs and desires, that does create a sense of boundary or spaciousness around us as might be healthy for us, and also to be in awareness around the ways that that might actually be a spark for or be up against some generational healing. What do I mean by generational healing? I'll say more shortly, but many of the things that we're grappling with, that we're working with in our own ways of being, if we, again, track backwards a little bit further, we get to see that we're part of a family system and a family dynamic. We're part of a cultural system and a cultural dynamic. We're part of a lineage and a legacy. And sometimes it can feel like, well, why can't I change this, or why can't I do something different? But ultimately, what we know is that we are a product of these systems that we've been a part of and these lineages that we've been a part of. And so if we're wanting to change something for ourselves, it's often going to be connected to the broader system of the relationships that we are in, the families we come from, again, the cultures we come from. And so I believe it can be actually kinder to ourselves, although it can also sometimes feel a bit overwhelming. I believe it can be kinder to ourselves to acknowledge that it's not just us, to acknowledge that we're part of this longer line or bigger system, and that the work we may be doing, the choices we may be making, may be breaking chains, not just for ourselves, but for others. So that kind of sounds like a lot. I want to offer this in a way that doesn't feel like, the most heavy burden during the time as we're going into the end of the year and the new year, when you might already feel like you have a lot on your plate. So my aim for this session is really to give you an opportunity to find some practice and some peace inside of what's already likely going to come up over the next couple of weeks, and to be as resourced, as grounded, as resilient as possible during that time, and to have some ideas. It's like, oh, if I take stock before I go into a context, if I take stock before the thing starts to happen, make some decisions, opt into a few practices, know what I'm choosing, then when you're under pressure, then when the going gets tougher, then when you're in those contexts, you at least already have something else to look to besides your defaults. So this session is designed to give you something else to look to besides your defaults around boundaries, around desire, and around intergenerational relationships, dynamics, baggage, etc., that might be relevant during the holidays. Okay, that all being said, let's take a couple of minutes and ground ourselves for the sake of just feeling better today, but also for the sake of coming into this conversation in a good way. So I invite you to, whether you're watching live here now or watching later, take a couple of moments to breathe more deeply. We're going to bring ourselves into connection, into relationship with the sensations in our own bodies, meaning let yourself feel yourself, feel something, see what you can notice. What we know is that it's impossible to be thinking about something somewhere else and to be feeling our bodies at the same time. So to get present, we're going to begin to feel or continue to feel. See if you can notice, for example, if you're sitting, the pressure of your butt on the chair. Very concrete. See if you can notice maybe anywhere in your upper body that you feel tension. First, just notice. If you want, you can also then aim to relax it a bit. Just noticing is a good first step. You might notice the movement of your breath. Notice the temperature of your feet. Or notice what else that you can notice. Good, and then on the next breath, I invite you to take a bigger breath in and a longer exhale, and let that drop your weight just a few percent more. So you're like relaxing muscles, breathing in and out. And as you're doing this, just notice if I need to be doing something else, if this is taking too long, if, oh shoot, that email I didn't answer, if things come in, see if you can on purpose not engage with them for these few minutes. This is part of a practice, a somatic practice of boundaries. Wait, I'm gonna stay here. I'm gonna keep feeling for 10 seconds longer. That email will be okay over there, right? I can set that aside and create space. And as our lungs expand and contract and do that more broadly, we're actually creating space on purpose inside of ourselves, literally. The expansion of your lungs, the contraction of your lungs, creating space. You might notice that also expands your rib cage, the rest of your body side to side, taking up a little more space. Good, and then we're gonna center in, line up around 4 dimensions of the human body. So first we'll start with our length. So letting yourself get a little taller, a little longer through your spine without over trying or overreaching or overextending. Just be tall as you are. And you might notice that, for example, if you were a little collapsed or rolled in, you can even try this on, collapse a little, roll in a little, and then get tall again and notice how that creates space again. More space through the front of your body, for example. More space you might imagine between your vertebrae. Good, and then let's center in the second dimension of the body, the width. So again, paying attention to the breath, the ribs expanding outside to side, and let yourself expand out to meet your own edges. I'm taking up some space here. You might imagine that on every breath, your own energetic body, so the field just outside of your own physical body, expands a little more. It pushes out a little more. It opens up, out. And in that opening, almost like pushing through sand or pushing not against, but toward what's around you, that there's again more space created for you. I'm going to take up space so that I have space. I'm going to fill the space so that I have space. What are we filling it with? Your breath, your own energy. Could be like I'm filling it with what matters to me, or I'm filling it with my desires, what I care about. Getting full of yourself, literally. Good, and then let's do that same thing front to back. So we're going to center in depth and allow ourselves to take up space behind us, and then in front of us. We'll start with behind. On your next breath, feel the back of your body. And then feel, if you can, a few inches behind the back of your body. Feel, sense, or imagine yourself expanding out into your own back. I'm taking up the space behind me. And then feel your insides for a moment. The beating of your heart, if you can. Again, the expansion of your lungs, maybe the food digesting in your tummy if you were eating just before. Good, and then let's feel our front, and same thing, feeling in front of your body, and then a few inches out from your own front, expanding. Imagining or sensing, getting a little bit deeper front to back, opening forward, taking up space. And then what we know is that the body learns on contrast. So I want to invite you for a moment to let some of that space go. So maybe to collapse your length, maybe to collapse inside to side, maybe to get smaller front to back, to pull or to let yourself fall inward and feel that. What's that like in your body? What thoughts may come up? Good, and then on your next breath, come back into your length, ear width, ear depth, expanding, taking up space, filling the space with you, top to bottom, front to back, side to side. Notice the difference. And let's do it one more time and notice how do you give up your space? How do you lose ground? How do you collapse? Go ahead and do it, and let yourself do it in the way you might do it back at home when you're not paying attention, or when someone triggers you, or when there's no time. I notice I'm not breathing a lot as I'm doing this with you, among other things. I close my eyes. And then on your next breath, fill yourself back up. Coming back into center, into length, into width, into depth, taking up space side to side, imagining your energetic body getting wider, getting deeper. And in the imagining of it, letting it be so. And feel this you full of yourself, taking up space. We could say the embodiment of some healthy boundaries. Where are your boundaries? They're out here at the edge of the space you're taking up. Good. Okay. And then let yourself connect with one thing that really matters to you, something you care about. Maybe it's a priority, maybe it's a person or a passion project. Just let that be present with you in the space you're taking up. Maybe the energy of it is part of what fills the space. It's something you love. It's something that matters. It's a part of you you're honoring. Notice the vibe of that. How does that feel? And as you're doing that, I want to just name a few things to set the tone for us today. I want to affirm out loud that we are in the right place at the right time to do the learning that will support us each on our paths today, whether we're watching live or watching later. That we and that you have access to inner knowing, that inner knowing is wise enough to help you know what you want, know what you need, to set boundaries, to make requests, to take up space. And I want to affirm that when our family legacies show up as tensions, it's because right now in this moment, something is actually ripe for healing, is asking to be healed and is ready to be healed. All right, take another long, deep breath and a big exhale. And let that go. Thank you for taking the time to be in your own body, to be paying attention. We do these practices and they may reset something, but also each time we do them, we're learning how to do them. The body is beginning to build a blueprint, build a pathway back to a different kind of state. And that's why we practice. We practice for the sake of finding that state again, coming back into that different relationship, different way of feeling and being, to make it more accessible and more accessible over time. It's not a one-hit wonder. It's not a one-time thing. We practice for the sake of building a relationship so that later down the road, you can walk into a room where it's chaotic and someone can say, wow, I really felt you. You felt different. You felt centered. I felt safer with you. I felt more at peace. Rather than get anxious, I wanted to settle. That we become leaders that can do that with practice. With practice. Also, we bring our minds into the practice so that we can find our way back again, so that we can count what actually happened and changed. So on that note, I want to invite you to grab a journal, a notebook, piece of paper, a Word document, a Google Doc, and take a few notes for yourself here. So first of all, if you did the practice with me, which I hope that you did, please write down 5 things that you felt in your body during the practice. See if you can come up with 5. See if you can remember, if you can re-access 5 things you felt, maybe at different moments or in the moment when you were expanded and you were feeling your own boundaries be wide. What was it like? What did you feel? What did you notice? See if you can really name maybe emotions, but also physical sensations. Where was that loose? Where was that wider? Where did that feel softer or more relaxed in your body? So taking notes, write 5 or more, but 5 things if you can. I'll give you a moment. Maybe some of them you still feel now. Good. And then take a look at the list you started, whether you're done or not. And if you've written things like, I felt awesome, or more like just descriptors of how it was overall, see if you can also add a few places that you felt something change in your body or a few concrete differences in how your body was being or feeling that might also be useful as part of the roadmap back. My chest softened across the front, for example. All noticings are welcome. And sometimes certain kinds of noticing can give us more empowerment, and some can not in a total way, but leave us a little at the mercy when we look at them later. Well, I felt spacious and awesome, and I'm not feeling that now, so shoot. What do I do? Well, my chest opened and softened. Oh, I could try that on again now. Okay, that gives me a doorway, if that makes sense. Okay, we're going to continue. And actually, what I'd like to do before I offer any more teaching or information here is to give you one more opportunity to do some writing. So I want to invite you, like we did in our last sanctuary session, to make a list. So you can just move down the page from where you were, and I'm going to give you 3 prompts for a list around your time, space, and energy. And we might just call this like ways that the world shrinks in on you list. And we're going to come back to why this matters and how to use this later. But I want you to just start with, like, now that we're centered and we're here and we're present, let's do a little brain dump. Okay, so the first part of the list, I want you to write at least 5 things that you need or want to say no to. 5 things that you want or need to say no to, let's say in the next couple of weeks or month. They might be really big things. They might be really small things. You might have to stretch to get to 5. If 5 is easy, go to 10. What are 5 things or 10 things you need or want to say no to? I'll give you just a couple minutes. Just a couple words, a quick bullet point is fine. And then I'm going to give you a second prompt. So same thing here. It's okay if you didn't finish your list. You can just jump down the page a little, leave some space, come back to it later. 5 situations, people, or things. 5 situations, people, or things that pull on your energy too much. Maybe some of them you already wrote about, but see if this sparks some different ideas. 5 people, situations, or things that pull on your energy too much, or that are likely to in the next couple of weeks. If 5 are easy, write 10. a word, a couple words each bullet, just so you'll remember it later, what you meant. Things, situations, people that pull on your energy too much. That's your self-assessment, too much. Okay, and one more list briefly. This one is more about you versus other things or other people. So 5 things or more, but at least 5 things you do instead of setting a boundary. 5 things you do instead of setting a boundary. So you might have to get a little creative. If 5 are easy, write 10. You might write something like, I avoid the situation. I apologize. I push back, but it doesn't actually work. I change the subject. I give in. Fill in the blank. What are 5 things you do? I close my eyes and look away. Yeah. What are 5 things you do instead of that moment when, instead of doing something boundary-like in the moment when it's called for or when you wish you could or would set a boundary? What do you do instead? Consciously or unconsciously, maybe you have to think a little bit, put yourself back in the situation to unpack, well, what do I do unconsciously? Take a moment. Okay. If you haven't finished your 5, you can come back to it later, but I do want to go ahead and move forward so that we can get through some of our reflections today. First of all, thank you for starting with practice. It is common in online work that we want to really front load everything with here's what we're doing and here's why we're doing it and all the information. And in the Guts and Grace body of work, I really find that getting people into practice first is a bit of a pattern interrupt that is helpful because it's like, let's learn it and then let's talk about what we did. We're really working through the body and then back informing or coming back up to the mind. So I appreciate you being willing to be in that kind of practice with me when perhaps if we haven't worked together, it would be a little less expected to come to an online event and do that first. I also like to be a little bit cheeky, like if you just listened and waited for other people to do that and now you're waiting for the download, I really do invite you to go back and actually do the work. I'm also going to put up here just a way to get some free meditations if you want to do more practice with me. If you liked starting with practice, you're welcome to join the Guts and Grace mailing list. If we're not already connected, you can see here at gutsandgrace.com/sign up to get a couple more downloadable guided meditations and ways you can be in practice of a similar kind with me virtually. I'd love to be connected if you like this work or so far it's feeling good. So I'll leave that up for now. And the intention behind today's session was to explore in a not too effortful, but just kind of reflective and, gentle practice way, the things that can go awry during the holiday season or any season when we find ourselves surrounded by family, friends, lots of people, lots of demands, a closing of the year at work, all of the things that can pull on us during this time, it can be easy to lose our centers. And if you're watching this not at the end of the year or holiday time, as we plan to leave it up, no big deal. This could be any day of your life, and there's probably lots that's relevant anytime. But this theme of boundaries, it's like, well, when is it? It's like when I'm centered and when I'm good and when I'm, in good shape and I'm really have my ground and there's not a lot of pressure. It's like it's not that hard, right? It's still hard, but maybe it's not as hard. But during these times when it's a little bit like, a perfect storm of lots going on, it's often the time that we tend to kind of lose our ground. So I wanted to give you at this moment in time some practices and some food for thought, some things to reflect on to support you to create a different experience for yourself in particular, but maybe to ripple out to those around you during this time. What is this about? So, for example, being able to find your center or regain your ground, even when others are kind of losing it or losing their heads or all over the place, or there's a lot of chaos. Being able to disrupt patterns of unhealthy communication or unhealthy energetic exchange. Maybe everything doesn't change overnight, but starting to disrupt things, starting to shift the game that we're playing with each other emotionally, energetically, conversationally. And also being able to show up more and more for your own desires and your own needs to, let's say, get your needs met more under pressure in the context of chaos. Because when we're not doing this, we've lost ourselves, right? When we're not doing this, we're not at our best. We're getting depleted. We're burning out. We're running out of steam. We don't lead or make decisions in the best possible way. So this is the intention of the session we're in here today, and in a way we're kind of playing with threads of unbalanced, unhealthy, unhelpful patterns of giving, taking, receiving, energetics, this kind of thing. The truth is, it's always a collaboration between you and the environment. So, during holiday visits, during travel, during end of year finishing things at work, there's a lot going on, that's true. And then there's the alchemy between what's going on and you as the person who it is meeting. And much of what we do inside of Guts and Grace is work with practices, mindsets, decision rules, experiments, behavior shifts that are right at that intersection of the world meets me, for the sake of creating a different kind of alchemy than maybe we're creating by default, or than maybe was the habit that we used to create in my family, or then maybe is the culture that we tend to create by default in our workplace. Because that point of meeting between you and the world, between the scenario, the context, what's going on, and your physical body, your emotional body, your own decisions, is really where the magic can happen. It's also where the mischief can happen, especially by default. So I want to draw attention to these really simple but not small moments of that meeting in what we're going to talk about today. It also does tend to meet things that are more generational. So generational in the sense of the history of the culture of this company, the history of the culture of this country, the history of my family dynamic and my family legacy, for example, the trauma that we may carry may be included in that intergenerational type healing that may be needed. And much can be done around that. But this point of practice, the point where I meet the world, the point of micro moments of choosing or not choosing, there's a lot of leverage in those moments. And when there's a lot going on, we have a lot of opportunities to be bumping into them, to be facing them, to be connecting with them. So this is what I want to highlight. And in the sort of teaching sharing portion of the session, I want to highlight 3 areas where you might have an opportunity in those micro moments to rebalance something that might be an unhealthy giving, taking, receiving habit, or an unhealthy energetic dynamic between yourself and others during this time. I hope that makes sense-ish. If you're not sure if it makes sense, just think about the last time. Maybe it was 5 minutes ago or yesterday or last holiday season, where there was a lot going on and there was like this stuff you would bump into where you're like, wow, I wish I'd made a different choice there. I wish this went differently. I'm feeling this because of those things that happened. I'm talking about the crucible that is. Okay, so 3 things that I want to invite you into experimentation with. The first one is a potential place of leverage. The first one is how you are or are not holding your line or your own container. How you are or not holding your line or holding your own container. The kind of catchword for this is boundaries. Am I holding my own center, my own line, my own container, and therefore holding other things out, perhaps? Therefore, holding other things at bay to some extent, perhaps. Yeah. What happens somatically in these moments is that the world begins to sink in on us. It begins to take, it begins to pull from, it begins to come in, both sort of metaphorically and literally. Yeah, somebody's draining my energy. Something is asking more than I actually have to give. And there's this kind of coming in, this collapse that can happen. This is why I invited you to both do the practice we started with and make the list that we made. It's really in the domain of this first point, the first opportunity to create some change. I'll tell you a brief story. There's a woman I was working with a number of years ago who was kind of like director of operations in her company, fairly small company. And it turned out that she was just the single point of failure for a lot of things in the organization, and a lot going on around her all of the time. And what we found was that there were many things that were, to use our language of the question, yes, like many things that she wanted to say no to, many things that were pulling on her energy too much by her assessment. And then there were also a number of things that she would do that all seemed fairly not that big of a deal, but that when you added them all up led to having zero time and space to breathe, eat lunch, go to the bathroom, etc., right? And feeling incredibly burned out. So what we started to work with was the embodiment of space, of taking up space, of boundaries, of filling herself up with her own self, of her own choices, of her own desires, of her own needs, kind of like we did in the somatic practice here. So that there was less of a vacuum for things to come in on. The more she let go of what she cared about, the more she didn't know what she wanted or needed, the more she collapsed herself and her needs, the more room there actually was for things to come in and take that space. So we really worked both in choice, indecision, in vocalization and verbalization of needs, desires, connecting herself with what she wanted and needed and knew for herself, but also with the somatic practice of coming more fully into her own center in the way that we just did together, actually taking up the space energetically. What she found was that she started to develop a vision and a practice of like a physical, a visceral experience of a vision of almost like a bubble around her, that the expanding out into the world around her helped her to hold a sensation of having more space for herself. When she felt collapsed and closed in on, it felt difficult to ask for something, to know what she might need or want. And in the bubble, it was easier to find. So this is the experiment that I want to invite you into. Here's how to do it. 1, if it's interesting to you, to be in a somatic practice of expansion, of allowing yourself to choose at any given moment in time. Maybe you go, let me do this a couple times a day, to take up space in your own energetic body, to come into, to fill yourself with yourself as a physical or embodied practice. Just notice what's different. If you walk into a room and it feels like there's nowhere to go or you have to do X, and you come into your own center in this way, you might find it feels a little different. There might be more access to knowing or to need or desire. There might be more access to courage, for example, from there. So you can experiment with the physical practice of this. One of the free meditations I give away on the link that I shared here will give you a guided version of a practice like that. And then the second thing is to take a look at your list. Clearly, we have some things you may want to say no to and things that are pulling your energy, but specifically look at number 3. 5 things you do instead of setting a boundary. And I want to invite you to experiment with lovingly taking note of those things and experimenting with some kind of a pattern interrupt. Meaning, if this is what I tend to do, 1, maybe just don't do that. 2, try something different in the micro, in the absolute micro. So if I tend to say sorry and, get a little smaller in the face of somebody else taking something or asking for something or whatever, maybe it's that I don't say sorry. I don't say anything. Already that would be different, right? Maybe it's that I say something else, or I just let myself bump into them and take up the space. I'm giving you a kind of a silly example. But take a look at what you have, and actually in this moment, if you're willing, choose one thing. Is there one thing there? One thing you're doing instead that you could go on a diet from during this holiday season? I'm going to not do that thing. And you might just be a little, extra honest with yourself. Like, okay, there's many things I do, but like that one is everywhere. Or that one would actually be a little tricky for me to stop. It's like it's so practiced. Perhaps take that one on as an experiment. Has to be that you're okay if you fail, right? It's not like a performance. It's like, wow, okay, I'm going to try for the next 5 days, 10 days, 15 days to decommit to that behavior, to de-invest in that particular strategy. I'm going to actually pay attention enough that I catch myself doing it with love, without beating myself up. And then I'm going to uninvest. I'm going to take some energy out of that and see what else might show itself. Okay, so holding your line, holding your container, this idea of setting boundaries and de-investing in the things that you do to give up or that don't create that container for yourself. Really, that could be enough. If that's all you do, and it sounds simple, so I may not be teaching you something new, but if you do it and you didn't do it before, that would be different, right? So the somatic practice is designed to help you get more resource to be able to make a different choice, to be able to opt out or opt into something, to have the resource to do it. So it may be different if you actually take it on. Number 2, so holding your line, holding your container, we could say boundaries. Number 2 is the other side of the coin, being self-full. So filling yourself up with you. We did that a little bit somatically in the practice. I'm going to expand and let me be what fills that extra space. So there's that. But also in practice, this is the part that's really about listening to your own needs, your own desires, your own longings. Excuse me, for example, my need to sneeze in this moment. Thank you for your patience. The part of you that is perhaps so collapsed in, so depleted, so allowing others to take, so not holding those boundaries, that it's actually even hard to know what you want or need. If that's true of you, then there's a retending, a reinvesting, a reconnecting with, a re-allowing of that information to be part of what comes forward for you. I'll say that again in a different way. When we stop listening, then we stop often getting information. Our body stops telling us because it's kind of painful to need things and ask for them and not get them over and over and over and over again. You might know what that's like between human to human, but your body has that relationship with you. So if it feels like you don't know, if it feels like it's even hard to know, some of these practices of allowing, creating the space, creating the container can be the foundation. Then it's like, I'm going to be an intentional practice of asking, of listening, of allowing the information to come forward, of making space for it to come forward, and then letting what's true about that information be part of what I fill myself up with. What do I need? What do I want? What do I care about? What matters to me? Allowing that to have some space, letting yourself get more full of you versus what everybody else needs or wants from you. Let's do just a little taste of that together. So I want to invite you to again, come back into connection with the sensations in your body. So take a moment. You can do this standing, sitting, lying down, moving, walking, dancing, all of the above. I'm just going to do it sitting as I'm here to screen with you. If it would feel good to stand or to lie down, you can do that. Bring your awareness again to the sensations in your body. Feel yourself breathe. Feel the length of your spine. Feel out to your own edges. Feel your muscles softening or not. And then in the spirit of listening, allowing ourselves to get more filled up with ourselves and to know what's actually there, I want you to bring your attention again to your body and just gently, intentionally ask your body, what do you need? And literally wait and listen for the answer. Body, what do you need right now? Or what do you need when we're at home next week? But even just right now as a good starting point. Body, what do I need? And if you're in a place you can speak it out loud, just to let yourself hear yourself say it out loud. Maybe it's 1 or 2 words of an answer. I need, I want. Feel it as you say it. And then ask again. What do I need? What do I want? Say it, or think it, and feel it. If nothing comes, that's okay. Trust that as you're asking, something is coming, even if it's not understandable or translatable or hearable yet. Doing the asking, allowing. Ask again, what do I want? See what happens. Listen. Good, and then ask this question, what matters most? Maybe the same kinds of answers or a different kind of answer will come. What matters most this week, this month, in my life? What matters most? And just feel. Usually you don't get like very long sentences when you're asking the body, making space for your own longing. Might be a couple words. What matters most? Okay. Take whatever came, even if you're not sure if anything came, and just take a moment or two to journal, to translate that back into mind, into writing, into something that you could come back to later. Just see what you got. If you didn't feel you received information specifically, you could just write, here's what I felt, here's what I noticed, here's what happened. If you got an answer, great, write it down. What do I need? What do I want? What matters most? And then you can ask yourself the additional question, what if I put those first? Or what if I honored those? Literally, what would that look like? What would you do differently? What might you ask for or say? How might you be differently in your own body and your own energy and your own skin? So we're translating body information, longings, desires, needs into concrete, again, practice. How do I operationalize a body up need or desire or longing? I have to do the translation. So you're welcome also to come back to this, right? If it's like you're good at holding boundaries, but you don't receive anything, ask for anything, allow anything, you don't really be yourself in that, then step 2 is for you. And even if you're not yet good at holding your line or creating a container, holding boundaries, this can actually be a great place to start, especially when you're by yourself. Let me practice having something to fill the space with so that it's worth holding a line or a container around it. Oh yeah, now that I'm connected with what matters, now it might be worth the risk of not doing the thing I do to let go of my boundary. Okay, so number 1, holding a line, holding the container, boundaries. Number 2, being self-full, listening to, owning, allowing space for your own need, desire, longing to come through. Number 3, we'll visit shortly, is I'm going to call it choosing to break legacies. It connects to 1 and 2. Choosing to break legacies. So maybe you're one of those people for whom the holidays are both fun and also challenging because we have a family legacy of behaving together this way, of pulling on each other or taking from each other or pushing each other away in these ways. If that's so, then this is a great moment to be in practice, to experiment with something a little bit different. The interesting thing about our families and the people around us is that we may come into a scenario knowing, and maybe even they want for us, a different way of being, a different way of being in the dynamic, a different way of giving. And yet, given our dynamic, those around us who are practiced in this with us will tend to reward the opposite. They'll tend to reward the old pattern, the old habit, the old thing. Yeah. I'll give you a not family example. Like I work with a lot of women whose bosses, for example, want them to get out of the weeds and be more strategic. And then at the same time, turn around a few hours later and give them a really detailed task to do because who else in the organization can do it better than them? And so then they're being rewarded for doing exactly the thing that they're being asked not to do in their performance reviews so that they can get to the next level. And we have this loop that starts to ensue. Same thing in our family dynamics, right? Maybe there's even a family member, they're like, wow, you need to take better care of yourself. But then at every turn, you're being asked for more, or there's a nagging, or there's a certain kind of reflection that happens. Once again, the practice here is at the moment where the you that you are meets the context. And one of my clients a number of years back used this expression that I thought was really quite brilliant. He was talking about a relationship with his intimate partner, actually. But he said, there's this way that I take the bait and then I go down the same old rabbit hole. I take the bait and then the next thing that always happens. So it's almost like this moment where something entices you to do the thing that you always do. And then, in fact, that creates or that has the same dynamic unfold. So, let's see. The expression intergenerational healing is a very big expression, right? Sorry, I lost my light. It sounds like a lot, and it can be, right? There can be somatic trauma healing and release and a lot of deep things that we may need to do, deep therapy, hours of body release that are required to really ultimately do this work well and completely. And in these moments where we meet our environment, there's also an opportunity to be in very simple but not easy, healing experiments, healing practices. And this piece I just shared about taking the bait, or we could say like let go by, I'm going to let that one go, is a beautiful, simple, and not easy, but beautiful, simple experiment that one can do. And I recommend experimenting with during this intense time of the year. So holidays, transition time. Again, it takes a little bit of foresight. It's unlikely that you won't take the bait and go into the same old dynamic, i.e., it's unlikely that you will break that chain in the moment if you're not aware of what it is and how you do it. So as we move toward the end of this session, I want to invite you to spend a little time reflecting, maybe after we close or later tonight, about one or two things you do that actually take the bait, that engage with the same old unfolding that is what doesn't feel healthy or what you prefer not to be in or what depletes you. It might connect to, again, the list we made earlier and the third bullet point, or it might be something a little different. So if you think about one or two key relationships, maybe it's between you and a group or between you and an individual, one or two key relationships you'll be spending time with over the next couple of weeks. And then consider one or two ways that you tend to take the bait or something that comes at you that you then engage with, grasp onto, and define for yourself. What would I'm going to let that go by? I'm not going to get hooked there. I'm not going to take that bait move be in advance in the simplest possible form, right? So it doesn't have to be, and then I do this, and then I'm finally grounded and I speak my mind. It's like, no, not all of that. That's too much. Just the first micro step. The first micro step that unhooks you from everything that tends to happen after that. I roll my eyes. Wait, I'm not going to roll my eyes, for example, right? Something simple. That's all for now. Okay. So in summary, we're working with ways that we might have room to rebalance, reprogram unhealthy giving, taking, receiving, interacting habits over this period of time. And 3 practices we named. First, we did a somatic practice of filling ourselves up and taking up space. So I recommend that. You can get a download of that practice at the link below me here right now. But also then choosing one or two ways that you don't set a boundary and experimenting with doing something different. So holding my line, creating this container, and then the practice of listening more deeply, creating moments to actually source for yourself what matters, what do I need, what do I want, teaching, retraining the body to allow that to come through for you more often, and then letting that be what you're filling the space with. And then being in a practice of, with one particular dynamic in your world, in your life, in your family, even at work, of not taking the bait, not engaging in the same way that you might have. I hope this is helpful. A couple things before we close. So first of all, if you just choose one of these, if this is difficult territory for you, pick one. Pick the one that felt the most juicy or the most interesting or the most accessible to you. And just try it on and take notes. How's it go? Pay attention. See what you learn. It's all an experiment. Experiments open new doors. You can come back and listen again, try another one later. If this speaks to you and you feel like you might like to go deeper, I already had shared the link to get some more info from us, but we do actually run a primary group coaching program called Guts and Grace for women leaders that begins in January. And we have a couple of special bonuses for enrollment now in December. I just put up the link to book a discovery call. So if you'd like to learn more about how specifically to engage in these practices for yourself and how leveraging them could create a difference in your life, work, or leadership that would be important for you in 2024, one of my team or myself are happy to have a conversation with you. So please feel free to apply for a discovery call, gutsandgrace.com/apply. This program is uniquely designed as a spiritual and business activation program for leaders inside of corporate, government, nonprofit organizations, as well as entrepreneurs who are looking to or already leading change and want to do it with healthier boundaries, with a better sense of giving and receiving without burning out energetically. So if that is something that is relevant to you, I'd love to talk. And anyway, it's been a pleasure to be with you this last hour. I look forward to hopefully keeping in touch here online or other places. Message me if you have questions. Please practice something. If you decided to invest your hour here, take something home with you and try it on. And I wish you a deeply nourishing and meaningful rest of your day. Take good care, and hopefully I'll